Hey, welcome back to the Zawadi Within, where we talk about personal growth and development. And I just wanted to talk briefly about how to stop being a people pleaser. Now, being a people pleaser is something that a lot of empaths kind of fall into this trap. If you're like me or you're an oldest child growing up, usually there's a lot of pressure on you. So you kind of learn from an early age that you need to fall into line. It's just best if you don't like conflict, it just makes things smoother. Now, the bad side of this is when you're a people pleaser, you're not able to establish boundaries. You either get taken advantage of or you're resentful because you're doing so much for other people and they're not returning that. Like they're not reciprocating that. So, one thing I would encourage people who are kind of caught in this rat race of people pleasing is to one, just take a step back and look at their motives and look and see, is it really worth it to do something to please this person? At the end of the day, is it worth it for you to sacrifice who you truly are or sacrifice what you truly want? What I'm saying, I'm not saying that you should go and just be rude and it has to be your way or the highway all the time. But I want you to think, okay, if I'm doing something, if I'm bending over backwards to just help this person out or do what they want me to do, um, is it sacrificing too much from me? Like, will I feel like I need something back in return? Will I be resentful if they don't reciprocate this in the future? If you're just doing something purely from the goodness of your heart, which I think we should, then yeah, go right ahead and do it. But if you know if you do something that it's going to drain you, because sometimes we may have good intentions, but we also have to be realistic about our energy, about our time management, about like, can we really do this? Like if somebody needs somebody to show up at 3 a.m., not all of us can do that. Does that mean that you're a bad friend? Not necessarily, but you have to be realistic about your life or situation and see, is it worth it? Like, can you really do that? And I think we have to ask ourselves those questions. And one of the most important ways to do that is to establish boundaries. We need to already have boundaries established in our minds. So if somebody asks us to do something that we feel like is too much, we already know what is too much for us. Because sometimes people just say yes and they haven't really thought it through. So just kind of being a little bit more in touch with ourselves, being a little bit more in tune with ourselves to know, okay, this is something I'm not comfortable with. This is something that would probably stress me out. Sometimes we don't have an opportunity to establish a boundary until a situation comes up. And one of the best things I would encourage you to do is before you give an answer, just say, hey, give me a second to think about that. Maybe a day or two or a minute or an hour just to really think about that if you're not the type of person who really thinks on their feet. And I can say if you hear somebody ask something from you and you already initially know you don't want to do it, take a moment and think about, why don't I want to do this? And is it worth it at the end? If you don't do something that somebody wants and they refuse to be your friend or they get upset with you, that kind of shows you more about their character than yours. So I would encourage you to just kind of look at that. If you say like, no, I'm sorry, I'd love to help you, but I really can't do that right now, and that person becomes upset, there's probably an issue with that person in general. That sounds like somebody's trying to take advantage of you, or they're just used to walking all over you and now they're shocked that you're finally having a boundary. So establishing boundaries is good. It maintains friendships, it maintains relationships. It's vital to our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with others, because that's where people get into situations where they do so much for someone and they get upset one day and they explode and you're like, why are you upset? Because that person didn't communicate their boundary early on, and so now they're frustrated and resentful when they could have just communicated early on. So I just want to encourage you to establish boundaries, and initially it will be uncomfortable. If you grew up just saying yes, just trying to keep the peace, when you first start setting some boundaries and people are not used to them, they won't like it initially because they're not used to it. You can't really blame them. You always say yes and all of a sudden you're saying no, and you don't feel the need to give an explanation. Like one thing I used to do is if I said no, then I feel like I need this whole explanation to validate my reasoning for saying no. And at the end of the day, if you don't really want to do something, you really don't have to get anybody else's approval. You don't want to do it. You know you don't want to do it. That's it. They should be able to respect your decision. And if they can't do that, then that's a problem with them. They have no right to come and force you or coerce you into doing something that you don't want to do. If you're going to do something, you need to do it out of the goodness of your heart, period. And if you can't do that, just don't, you just might as well not do it, honestly. I think people doing stuff because they feel obligated, to me personally, I think it's just better off if they don't do that at all, because that attitude is going to come out eventually. Like they're going to feel like you're not really doing this because you want to, you're doing this only out of obligation. And once you don't feel obligated, then you're going to become resentful. So to avoid resentment and all of that, just be upfront. Be upfront. If you want to say no, say no. And initially saying no feels a little bit weird, but just grow comfortable with the discomfort. Another reason why sometimes people fall into the trap of people pleasing is because they want to be liked. And that is normal. Most people want to be liked in some way, shape, or form. But we have to understand, like, what is the cost of being liked? Like, is it worth it at the end of the day? Do I want to be liked in the sense that I have to completely betray myself and completely um, be untrue to who I am for other people to like me, or do I want somebody to like me for who I am, for them to see who I truly am, and then decide, hey, I want to know this person, or hey, I want to be friends with this person for them. And we all have our pros and our cons. We all have things that we need to work on, but we do deserve people who genuinely care for us, and we should do the same for others. So just understanding that, hey, sometimes we may not be able to do things that others want us to. That doesn't mean that we don't care about them or that we're not a kind person. It just means we're realistic about our capabilities, we're realistic about what aligns with us, and also knowing that sometimes we do need to take a break, sometimes we do need to rest, and sometimes you don't really have to give people an explanation. Most of the times I don't really think like explanations are necessary, but we do that because we don't feel like our response is valid enough. So we give an explanation with the hopes that somebody else will validate our decision for refusing to do something. Another reason why we may fall into people pleasing is also maybe when we're younger. This enabled us to stay safe. This is also biological. Like people tend to not want to have differing opinions or to voice those differing opinions because back in the day, if you were different, you could have been thrown out of the tribe or whatever, and that kind of like greatly diminished your chances of survival. So that is like kind of like the biological response or reason. But now we are adults. The world has changed a lot, and you know what? We don't have to depend on others as much as we did back then. That doesn't mean that we don't need human beings. It doesn't mean that we don't need genuine human connections. But at the end of the day, we all should be true to who we are, respecting other people's standards and boundaries, but also respecting our own. And when we respect ourselves, we're actually more efficient in respecting another person's boundary. Like, because I don't feel the need to give people explanations when I don't want to do something, if someone doesn't give me an explanation, I don't feel like I'm being slighted in any way. I'm like, okay, they can't do that. Okay, they can't show up at this day or whatever. That's fine. They have things to do. I also have things to do. So just understanding that when we give ourselves grace and respect, we're able to do that with other people. So I just want to encourage you to just take a second to just kind of be true to yourself. See, maybe analyze ways and situations and where you're like, did I really want to do that, or was I doing that because I was afraid of their reaction? If we're afraid of somebody's reaction, I think we probably just need to go ahead and reevaluate that whole relationship, because we shouldn't be in a place where we're fearing another person's reaction. We should be in a place where we're able to be genuine with each other and say like, hey, I don't agree with that, but respectful. Yeah, I don't agree with that, but we're still respecting the other person's opinion, the other person's stance, while still being true and respectful towards ourselves. So definitely, yeah, be true to yourself, be authentic, and those who truly want you for you will respect you and be there for you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Be blessed because you are worthy and deserving of love and respect. Bye.